Charlotte Abbott felt trouble long before she reached Cottonwood Creek. Her mare, Silver, stumbled with each step after 3 long days on the trail, and Charlotte could barely keep her eyes open. But when the small town came into view, she straightened her back. People in places like this smelled weakness the way wolves smelled blood. She was not about to give them either. Cottonwood Creek looked like it was holding itself together with hope more than lumber. Sun-bleached buildings leaned toward each other along a dusty road, their windows watching Charlotte as she rode in. She slowed Silver outside a worn saloon and stepped onto the wooden walkway, trying to shake the stiffness from her legs. A boy sat on a bench nearby, carving a piece of wood. "Where can I find work?" she asked, flipping him a penny. The boy caught it without looking up. "Depends what you can do. Courthouse down the street has postings, but folks here don't hire women for ranch work." Charlotte nodded, even as frustration stung her chest. She had lived that truth too many times. Still, she walked to the courthouse, climbed its steps, and headed straight for the public board. She scanned past wanted posters and cattle auctions until something stopped her cold. A notice. Simple, short, impossible. Willow Creek Ranch. 300 acres. Sale price, $1. Sold as is. Buyer assumes all liability. She read it 3 times. No one sold land for $1. Not unless something was wrong. But hope pushed her feet toward room 12 before doubt could stop her. The clerk looked up, surprised. "Help you, miss?" "The ranch listed for $1. Is it real?" He sighed like he'd answered this question too many times. "It's real, but the place has a bad history. Families don't last long there. Strange things happen. Animals spooked. Tools vanish. Shadows people swear they saw move." Charlotte felt her pulse jump. Fear and curiosity wrestled inside her. "I'll take it." The clerk blinked hard. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. I have $1. Do you have a deed?" 20 minutes later, Charlotte walked out with papers in hand. Her own land. For the first time in years, something belonged to her. The ride to Willow Creek Ranch took the rest of the day. The trail grew faint. The land grew lonely. When she finally saw the ranch in the fading light, disappointment punched her in the stomach. The house sagged almost in half. The barn leaned to one side. Fences lay broken across dried fields. Dust and tumbleweed covered everything like a forgotten grave. But it was hers. She watered Silver and stepped inside the house. Dust coated every surface. Sunlight leaked through gaps in the roof. Old furniture slumped under years of neglect. It was broken, but she had lived in worse. She headed toward the barn before dark. It smelled of age and emptiness, but something felt off. The stalls were dusty except one. Straw lay disturbed, and a single pile of fresh manure sat near the back. Her hand went to her pistol. "If someone's in here, show yourself," she warned. A deep snort answered her, then the sound of something large shifting in the shadows. Charlotte stepped closer, heart pounding. She reached the last stall and froze. A horse, but not any horse she had ever seen. He stood massive and silent, his coat a deep, rusty brown beneath the dirt. His ribs showed, but the power beneath them was unmistakable. His eyes studied her with sharp intelligence, not fear. Charlotte swallowed. "Well, I wasn't expecting a roommate." The horse flicked an ear but didn't back away. He watched her like he understood more than a normal horse should. He was thin, dirty, neglected, but under all that, he was magnificent. "Did they leave you here?" she whispered. Another soft snort, almost an answer. Charlotte stepped back slowly. "We'll figure things out tomorrow." As she walked away, she felt his gaze on her until she stepped into the night. She slept lightly on the dusty floor of the house, staring up through holes in the roof at the stars. Coyotes cried in the distance. Every so often she heard movement in the barn. That rusty-colored horse haunted her thoughts. Who had abandoned him? How long had he been alone? Why had no one taken him? She didn't know, but she felt something settle deep inside her. She and that horse had found each other for a reason. Morning came too soon. After coffee and hardtack, Charlotte walked to the barn with a bucket of water. Silver greeted her, but her eyes went straight to the stall. The big horse stood alert, ears forward. "Morning," she said quietly. "I brought you water." He didn't approach while she stood nearby. She gave him space and began cleaning Silver's stall, talking as she worked. "My name's Charlotte Abbott. I bought this place yesterday. I figure you've been here longer. I'm going to call you Rusty for now. Fits your coat." His ears flicked at the name. Hours passed as she fixed small things around the barn. Rusty never came close, but he watched her the entire time. By afternoon, the water bucket was empty. Progress, she thought. 1 week later, Rusty stepped out of his stall and approached her on his own for the first time. He touched her hand with his soft muzzle. Something warm filled Charlotte's chest. Trust. Real trust. She didn't see the danger coming until later. Not from Rusty. From the men who didn't want her there. And Rusty would be the first one to sense it. Rusty's first warning came on a hot afternoon while Charlotte repaired a broken fence near the house. He lifted his head from grazing, his muscles tightening like a drawn bow, his ears locked onto the road, his tail flicked with sharp agitation. Charlotte knew enough about horses to trust their instincts. Something was wrong. Moments later, she heard the sound herself. Riders, more than one. 3 men appeared over the rise, riding onto her property like they owned it. Charlotte recognized the stocky, red-faced man from town, the one who had mocked her, the one whose laugh had felt like a thorn in her spine. Rusty stepped between Charlotte and the riders, his size alone enough to make their horses fidget. "Afternoon," the red-faced man said. "Tom Hackett. We're your neighbors." "Thought we'd pay a visit." Charlotte wiped sweat from her forehead and kept her voice calm. "What do you want?" Hackett grinned. "We want to help you. Folks say that ranch is cursed, and you won't last a season, so we're offering you $20 to take it off your hands." Charlotte crossed her arms. "The ranch isn't for sale." His grin faded. "Now don't be foolish. You're alone. You don't have money, help, or experience. Winter will wipe you out. Best to cut your losses now." Rusty stepped closer to Charlotte, his ears pinned, a quiet growl forming in his throat. Charlotte didn't look at the stallion, but she reached out and touched his shoulder to steady him. "I said no. Leave." Hackett's eyes hardened. "Would be a shame if something happened to that big horse of yours." Charlotte's hand drifted toward her pistol. Hackett held up his palms. "Easy now. Think about our offer. We'll be back." The men turned and rode off, but Charlotte felt the threat hang in the air like storm clouds. She rested her forehead against Rusty's neck. "We're not alone anymore," she whispered. "You and me both need to be careful." The trouble started small. Tools went missing. A section of fence she repaired was torn down the next morning. Boot prints appeared near the barn. Then one morning she found a dead coyote hanging from her gate, a warning meant to shake her courage. It did not. Rusty grew more protective every day. He followed Charlotte everywhere, staying close like a shadow. At night he stood in the yard, refusing to sleep inside the barn, watching the land with eyes that missed nothing. As summer turned to late-season heat, Charlotte rode into town for supplies. Inside the general store, Mr. Briggs studied her with concern. "You look worn down," he said. "Trouble at the ranch?" Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. "Hackett and his men." Briggs set a box of ammunition on the counter. "On the house. I admire your grit. More folks do than you think. Some can't say it out loud, but they're watching. Hackett goes too far, they'll step in." It wasn't comfort, but it was hope. She rode home feeling less alone. That night, Rusty paced restlessly. Charlotte tried to sleep, but every sound snapped her awake. When dawn came, she felt like she hadn't rested at all. The next week brought the wildfire. Rusty's thunderous cry ripped Charlotte from sleep. She ran outside with her rifle and saw flames glowing in the eastern pasture. 3 riders circled the fire, driving it farther onto her land. "Hey!" she shouted, firing into the air. The riders scattered, but the fire kept spreading. For 2 hours, Charlotte fought the blaze with everything she had. Rusty was beside her the entire time. He stomped out smaller fires. He pushed her forward when she stumbled from exhaustion. He stayed so close she could grab his mane when her legs shook. They fought like partners, each one refusing to quit. When the fire finally died against a rocky ridge, Charlotte dropped to her knees, coughing and shaking. Rusty lowered his head to her shoulder. His body trembled too. "We survived," she whispered, "but they'll be back." She rode into town the next morning, anger carrying her forward. She marched into the sheriff's office and filed a complaint. The sheriff shrugged her off. "You got proof it was Hackett?" he asked. "Could have been anyone." "So you won't help?" "I'll look into it." She knew that meant nothing. She walked out, feeling hollow. But Mr. Briggs stopped her before she left town. His voice was low. "You're not alone," he said. "Some of us believe in you. Hackett won't get away with this forever. When he slips, people will be ready." Charlotte rode home with new resolve. She spent the next days preparing. She cleared brush so she could see approaching riders, filled buckets with water, checked her guns, strengthened weak spots around the property. Every evening she talked to Rusty while brushing him. "You don't owe me anything," she told him. "If danger comes, you can run." Rusty looked at her with steady eyes. She knew then he wasn't going anywhere. The attack came 3 nights later. Hoofbeats thundered in every direction. At least 6 men, maybe more. Torches flew through the air, landing near the barn and house. Gunshots cracked through the night. Charlotte fired back, aiming for torches instead of riders. She knocked 2 out of the fight, but more came. Then Rusty charged. The stallion slammed through the darkness like a bolt of wildfire. His scream tore through the night. He hit a cluster of riders so hard their horses panicked. One man was thrown. Another fled with his horse bolting beneath him. Charlotte used the moment to save the barn, shooting torches before they landed. But they were still outnumbered. Then help arrived. Mr. Briggs rode in first, shotgun raised. 4 more townspeople followed him. "For Miss Abbott!" Briggs shouted. The tide turned. Hackett's men fled in chaos. Charlotte staggered onto the porch, shaking with relief. Rusty limped toward her. A bullet had grazed his shoulder, staining his coat with blood. "You're hurt," she whispered, touching him gently. Rusty pressed his head into her chest, breathing hard but steady. Briggs approached. "That's one mighty horse you've got." He fought like he knew what was at stake. Charlotte nodded, tears running down her face. "We're not done yet," she whispered to Rusty, "but this time we're not fighting alone." Charlotte worked through the rest of the night tending Rusty's wound. The graze was shallow, but it bled more than she liked. Rusty stood still the entire time, occasionally lowering his head to nudge her shoulder as if trying to keep her calm. When she finally wrapped the wound and stepped back, the stallion let out a soft breath and touched his nose to her cheek. It felt like gratitude. Or maybe promise. Morning brought exhaustion, but also something new. Riders approached from town, not with threats, but with supplies. Word of the attack had spread faster than wildfire. 3 ranchers brought fresh hay. A shopkeeper sent flour and beans. Even a widow Charlotte had never met arrived with a basket of bread, saying simply, "You're not alone, dear." It was the first time Charlotte felt the town's support instead of their doubts. Tom Hackett and his men left Cottonwood Creek within days. Some said they fled to avoid arrest. Others whispered that Rusty haunted their dreams. Either way, the danger passed like a bad storm, leaving behind clear skies and a stronger community than before. With peace came work. Real work, hard work, but different now, because she wasn't fighting shadow battles every night. Charlotte fixed fences without watching over her shoulder. She patched the roof without thinking someone might shoot her from the trees. Rusty carried lumber, dragged posts, and stayed close like he never wanted distance between them again. By spring, the ranch began to breathe again. Grass grew thick in the pastures. The barn stood straight after repairs. Silver shined with new strength, and Rusty recovered fully, his coat gleaming a richer rusty gold than Charlotte had ever seen. When cattle prices dropped in the territory, neighbors warned her she'd struggle. Instead, her small herd grew healthy. Rusty proved himself a natural working horse, guiding cattle with sharp instinct and surprising gentleness. But through all these changes, Charlotte never forgot the moment they first met. A rusty-colored giant, standing alone in a dark stall, studying her as if he already knew she would change his life, as much as he would change hers. She worked to earn that trust every day. There were quiet nights, too, nights when the world outside felt bigger than the firelight inside her small cabin. She'd sit on the porch while Rusty grazed nearby. The sky stretched wide over both of them. Sometimes she'd talk to him about her parents, her childhood in Missouri, the wandering years when she felt like a leaf blowing across the west with no place to land. Rusty would listen the way only a horse could, patient, present, without judgment. One evening, several months after the attack, Charlotte walked out to the pasture with an apple in her hand. Rusty trotted over, his mane fluttering in the warm breeze. He lowered his head, accepting the treat gently from her palm. His eyes stayed on her long after the apple was gone. "You saved me," Charlotte said softly. "People talk about how I saved this ranch, or how I stood my ground, but the truth is, without you, I would have lost everything." Rusty pressed his forehead against her chest. Charlotte wrapped her arms around his massive neck. For a long moment, they stayed like that, two survivors who had learned to trust again. By the end of that year, the Willow Creek Ranch looked nothing like the abandoned place she had first seen. The house stood straight and warm. The barn smelled of clean hay. The pastures held life instead of dust. She even hired a young ranch hand from town, giving him a chance no one had ever offered her. One crisp spring morning, nearly 2 years after Charlotte had bought the land for $1, she stepped out onto her porch with a cup of hot coffee. The world stretched green and wide in every direction. Rusty grazed beneath the rising sun, his coat glowing like fire. The scars on his shoulder had long faded, replaced by muscle and strength. He looked like he belonged here, just as she finally felt she belonged. "Come here, boy," she called. Rusty lifted his head and trotted toward her, stopping close enough for her to feel his warm breath on her hands. She stroked his face, and he closed his eyes, leaning into the touch. "You were the real treasure on this land," she whispered. "This ranch cost me $1, but you changed everything." Rusty gently rested his chin on her shoulder. That was their language now, a promise that they were partners, family. Each the missing piece the other had been searching for without knowing it. Charlotte looked out at her land, the fences she built, the water she hauled, the nights she stood guard, the pastures Rusty had helped her save, and felt a kind of peace she had never known before. "I think we're finally home," she said. Rusty nickered quietly, as if agreeing. And together, a woman and a rusty-colored stallion who had once been forgotten by the world stood at the edge of a new future, one they built with grit, trust, and the unbreakable bond that changed both their lives forever.